Sorry, some of you then. Sorry, show me your gun. Sorry, this is Brett.
After a few minutes, it kind of got used to it, huh?
Yeah, just give me your sashes and your buckets. So we'll see you at 5? Yes. So y'all be back at 5? Okay. Yes, we'll be after you back. Right, so just come take off your sashes and put your buckets down and we'll go away, okay? Don't worry, you'll want your bikes. Will it go this far?
You have to go and talk to see how.
No.
Yeah.
You can see the house.
I'm thinking.
Rocco lives right around the corner. Huh? No, you haven't seen my inside. Remember when we went to Rocco's?
Right? Yes! Right!
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you all for attending our event. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I would like to introduce the Army of the Potomac. Starting from my right, we have the 69th New York, which is part of the famed Irish Brigade. Next in line is the 7th West Virginia.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Next in line is the 28th Massachusetts, which is also part of the famed Irish Brigade. Next in line is the 2nd Wisconsin, also known as the Iron Brigade. Next in line is the 20th Maine Volunteer Infantry. Next in line is the 2nd United States Sharpshooters. introduce our battery. We have the 4th and 5th U.S. Artillery. Can't forget our cavalry. Hands off to them.
Afternoon, everybody. I'd like to introduce the Confederate Brigade to you. First, we have the 1st South Carolina Sharpshooters. Next in line, we have the CS Marine Infantry Company B. Next, the newly formed and recognized 14th Tennessee Company B. Then we have the 47th Virginia Infantry. Virginia! And visiting us from another club is the Infantry. And last but not least, both mounted and dismounted, we have the 43rd Virginia Cavalry. Oh, and we also have the long arm of the battalion, the CS Artillery.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Please come visit with us in our camps and talk to us. We'd love to get to know you.
That was all of them all at once.
Watch this. Let's see this.
Yes.
Put it right there. Let me carry that.
No.
Infectious side.
No. Yeah, how did you know that? You were here earlier. Without knowing. You gotta remember, I don't have an x-ray machine. I don't have an MRI machine. He felt around in there and thought it was just very nice. Nice and clean. Well, guess what? When the ball went through the leg, it chipped.
Make you guys lighter. Okay.
I actually took several days to write that speech. And if you think about it, it takes a lot of effort and more time to write a short, meaningful speech than it does a long, rambling on speech. I finished writing the speech at Mr. Will's house in Gettysburg, where we were staying. And I changed some of the words as I spoke. I added "under God" to one of the lines because it was that divine presence that kept me strong during that terrible 4 years war that we had, a war that I did not want. Well, I was to speak after Sir Edward Everett spoke. He was a world-class orator, and he spoke for nearly 2 hours. He basically gave the whole history of the Battle of Gettysburg at the time. My speech lasted about 2.5 minutes. I did not get much applause. I didn't think it went well. I wasn't well either because I had a slight case of smallpox at the time. So it was not a very fun day. And I did wear glasses. I read a lot of my speeches. And so I will be. So, going back to November 19th of 1863 in the little town of Gettysburg. It was a terrible place. There were still many carcasses of horses laying on the battlefield. I did not have much time to get them all buried. There were still soldiers in shallow graves that had not been moved yet. There were caskets stacked up in the buildings that had not yet been buried yet. So, I have a question for you. In my speech, I say 77 years ago. Does anybody out there know what I meant by that? And 7 more. Good job, young man. But one more, 87 years before the Gettysburg Address. But what was I referring to? Declaration of Independence, yes. Well, here we go. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. it is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be here dedicated to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Thank you.